Hi there. I wanted to have you guys join in on some sound therapy that I am going to be doing. This is actually going to be a diagnostic. We're going to be checking out what my frequency is, checking out my voice, because the voice is the most healing thing that a human has, that they can bestow on another person as well as onto themselves. So I'm here with Wayne. Yeah, the ultimate healing instrument. Thank you, Wayne. This is Wayne Perry, and he is the mastermind that is going to be assisting me today. And he's got all sorts of fancy gadgets, and you can see that he is absolutely very well regarded. He's got a lot of content that he has been putting out, and so I just wanted to have you kind of take a sneak peek at what sound therapy looks like, what sound medicine looks like. But this is the very first step, which is really important, and that is evaluating where you currently are. Going to a sound bath is nice, but it's not going to do you as much good as it could if you knew what your own frequency was and what kind of healing frequencies that you need in order to get you to the place where you need to go. And so that is something that Wayne is going to help me with today, so I'll let him take it over from here.
Well, this is a diagnostic brain voice sound analysis, because if it's in your brain, it's in your voice. If it's dormant or missing from your brain, it's going to be missing from your voice. So the voice is not only the ultimate healing instrument. This has been researched that there's no sound machine or musical instrument that has the power of the human voice, because only the human voice is living, is a living instrument. It's connected to spirit, it's alive. So there's nothing that even comes close. The human voice is much more effective. It's really the ultimate healing instrument, and it's sitting right under our noses.
Wayne himself has healed himself from many, many ailments, many of which his doctors were very surprised about, because they were things that he shouldn't have healed himself of, but he was able to by using sound medicine. And so for me, the reason why I'm very intrigued in this, and many of you are familiar with my journey with my son Kyle, Kyle has a condition which is quite severe, and it renders him the inability to speak. And so unfortunately for him, he was not able to join us because he, without a voice, would not be able to participate in this portion of sound medicine. However, we all know how healing that music therapy is, and he responds extremely well to music and to hearing binaural beats, for example. We definitely have seen just a calmness in his vitals when he listens to certain frequencies, although we're kind of just doing the experimentation right now. But the next best thing to his own voice is actually the mother's voice. And so that's why I thought that it would be interesting to kind of embark on this journey with Wayne, to see what my frequency is and how I could use my voice to better heal my son.
Right, and it's interesting that you mentioned the mother's voice, because that leads me to wonder if you're familiar with the Tomatis Method. Have you studied anything about Alfred Tomatis? Because he uses the mother's voice, and he passed away some years ago, but he's one of the pioneers in sound therapy in Europe. And the Tomatis Method, they have centers all over the world, and it's a viable practice. It's very different from what I do, but they use white noise, but behind the white noise is actually recordings of the mother's voice, because of the power of the mother's voice with people. This was used with Maria Callas, the opera singer, and countless other people, adults as well as children. And so they do a series. I don't know that much about the therapy, but I think over like 90 days or something like that, they take out more and more of the white noise. So at first you don't even know there's a voice in there, let alone the mother's voice. And then after a while, several weeks, you can hear that there's a voice in there. And as they gradually pull out the white noise and increase the sound of the mother's voice, there's kind of an aha moment where they realize that there's somebody speaking and it's the mother's voice, and it has a significant therapeutic power. The number 12 is very significant, just like there's 12 numbers on a clock, 12 months of the year, 12 astrological signs, 12 inches on a ruler, 12 apostles of Christ. It goes on and on. There's 12 notes in the chromatic musical scale. So if you see this chart here that we're going to be using, there's actually 3 charts here. So we're going to be working in this area here today. and you'll see the 12 notes in the musical scale go across here, these columns. These numbers on these vertical columns represent the octave. There's only two things I need to do an effective diagnostic analysis. One is the octave of your voice. I already know, from hearing and doing this long enough, I know you're in the third octave. Initially, we're going to do some baseline questions and determine your speaking octave and where the frequencies tend to cluster. Now, I know you're in the third octave, but we speak in 1 to 1.5 octaves. And as I think I mentioned over the phone, I don't remember everything I said or didn't say, but you don't have to sing or chant or tone or make funny sounds. All you have to do is speak normally. This research is based upon the normal speaking voice. And so I don't know where your secondary octave is. Usually people have, as they speak in 1 to 1.5 octaves, they'll have a secondary octave. Usually it's 2 in your case. I know your main octave is 3. Your secondary octave could be 2, but I notice you have kind of a high voice. So it could be 4. So that's one of the first things we're going to determine is your speaking range. And then there's other harmonics, overtones that come through in the voice that reveal certain things about your health, and I'll talk to you more about that later. One of the things that probably 90% of people are out of balance in is their birth note polarities, and their birth note polarities has to do with your birth date and the number 12 again, because there's 12 months, 12 astrological signs, 12 notes in the musical scale. So we correlate that because the birth note polarities have been researched to kind of rule the duality in the body and the brain. I have some friends that do bodywork polarity therapy to balance the negative and positive polarities. That's a viable science of bodywork. But this is more focused on balancing those polarities because it also affects the yin yang and masculine feminine energy in the body. You know, the soul has no gender, but we as males, I have feminine energy. As a female, you have masculine energy. And so if it's well integrated, that's the way it should be. Some people have too much of one or the other, and that sometimes can cause difficulties in the personal life. But probably the most important thing that the birth note polarities tend to rule is your left and right brain hemispheres. You know, the left brain, as I'm sure you know, is the analytical, pragmatic part of the brain that functions with logic and reason. The right brain is the creative, intuitive part of the brain. Having your frequencies that correlate with your birth note polarities, bringing them into balance, because like I said, approximately 90% are off because we're affected by so many things in our environment. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the thoughts we think, the emotions we feel. All these things play a role in kind of tweaking and shifting our frequency pattern. And so that's why everybody's kind of out of balance. In 28 years of doing this work, I've never tested anybody that was perfectly in balance because there's so many things that affect that. But some people are just slightly out of balance and just need a little tweaking. Some people are really out of balance and need a lot of, more work to pull themselves into balance. So, all that being said, what's your birthday?
Yes, and before I answer that, I actually want to ask you a question because my birth date is not my real birth date. I'm adopted, and I don't know what my birth date is. And so I was assigned a birth date, and it was a birth date that was given based upon the day that I was found. And then they backed up a year. So
backed up a year?
Yeah, because they assumed that I was a year old when I was found.
Yeah.
And so my birth date isn't real. However, I think that there has been a lot of assumption onto that birth date based upon, I don't know if it's just something that kind of you grow into growing up, like, oh, I'm a Leo, oh, I have these traits. I was curious if a person is in perfect balance, could you conceivably algebraically back into what that person's birth date was?
Well, that's what I was just thinking about.
Yeah, because I'm certainly probably not in balance, but if I was, there could probably be a way to determine what my actual birth date is.
It would be interesting to explore, because it's important because, like, talking about, like you mentioned Leo, and I get a strong Leo sense, but I think I also get a strong Cancer energy. So, I mean, I don't even know when your birthday is, if it's even around that time, but...
One of the things that I do know is that when I was ultimately adopted, and I was 2 years old when I was adopted, supposedly according to my assigned birth date. But when I went to the general physician, at that time it was just a general practitioner. There was no such thing as a pediatrician, really.
Was this in the United States?
This was in the United States. I was adopted from South Korea over to New York. And so I grew up on Long Island in New York. And our family doctor said, there's no way that this child is 2 years old because the place in my head hadn't closed up yet.
Yeah, the space, soft spot
Yeah, the
there.
soft spot was still there. And he said she's much younger than 2 years old. So I don't know how much younger that means, but it could conceivably be several months off. Who knows? Maybe I am a Virgo or something else down the line from July. So
So when is your birthday? So
July 28th, 1970.
July 28th. So I have to put something in here.
Yeah. So why don't we put July 28th, 1970 in just for the heck of it?
Well, that's interesting because July,
Yeah.
except the end part of July, is Cancer, like I was saying.
The beginning part
So,
is, yeah.
I
Which
tuned
would
into that.
Yeah.
That would make more sense to me. And 70 is the year you're
The
guessing.
year that
Because they told you 71
Yeah.
or 72.
Chances are it was 1970 because I don't think that as a child, if they thought that I was 2, it would be 6 months earlier or 6 months later. So it was most likely 1970 that I was born, and I
That's
was adopted in 1972.
Okay, but it's more the month that is in question.
And the day, of course.
And what I find interesting about this birthday you gave me, I don't know, neither of us know if it's real, but you're a King of Hearts. If this is truly your birthday, you're a King of Hearts. Hearts represent emotions, love. They also are usually, it's related to social activity. Like Michael Jackson was a 10 of Hearts, and 10 is success with large groups of people. So it's obvious, he just fit his symbol as a Virgo, 10 of Hearts. And 10s are success.
And so if the 10 is success, what does king mean?
Well, the king is basically the ruler of that suit. Like spades are the strongest suit. There's the fewest amount of birth dates for spades. And conscious spades, it generally means like wisdom and healing and awareness. But the unconscious spades are drones. It's more of like, they can tend to be drone like workaholics, and they lose themselves if they're not conscious spades. That goes for any number, but the only number for the ruler, like I said, is January 1st. But then there's fewer spades than the other suits. Same thing with hearts. There's not too many spades, and they're in the beginning of the year, and not that many hearts, which generally are the later part of the year, except if this is generally your birthday, the 28th, I think, is the very first, June 30th is the very first King of Hearts, and then you're the second King of Hearts, because usually they're at the end of the year. There's a lot of clubs and diamonds birthdays. There's not so many spades and hearts.
So what would happen to somebody if they're an unrealized King of Hearts or a conscious King of Hearts versus unconscious?
Well, nothing necessarily. It's just that they may not be open, or they may not have the karmic positioning to come into inner awareness, spiritual awareness. One of the things I teach is sonic meditation and a lot of tantra. A lot of people think tantra is just a sexual practice. Only 10% of tantra is sexual. It's really about raising your energy through meditation and consciousness.
It's a very big challenge, but yeah. So I've kind of adopted into the 728 date, and I call it my own unless somebody can prove otherwise.
Well, do you have your own business?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that fits with the King of Hearts. One of the things about kings, females that are kings, it's like So the corresponding note to your birth date would be E. So I'm going to put a BD here for birth date.
Okay.
BD. And then your birth note polarity, you would count 6 here. But if you look at this chart here on the wall, you see here, this would be your birthday, E. And if you go straight across
to B.
Exactly. G sharp, where is it? No, you're right. A sharp, B flat. That's opposite it. So that's your birth note polarity. So over this column, A sharp, I left the flats out here because it changed the size of the column, but it's the same note, A sharp, B flat. So I'm going to put a little asterisk here because that represents your birth note polarity.
Okay.
So that's the first thing I'm going to look at once we complete your chart, because we want to bring those into balance. Now you could be in that 10% that they're in balance, but likely there's an imbalance somewhere else with some other frequencies. But
I would guarantee
we'll keep
there.
it open. Yeah, well, you know yourself, but in any event, that's we want to bring those polarities into balance, and it doesn't really matter to even know your birth date. I'm going to have to put something in there, but we're going to balance the frequencies whatever the dates are, whatever the frequencies are. Okay, so let me go over the chart with you first. There's a few things that I need to explain before I put you on the microphone.
Okay.
So that you're clear and you're wondering, why is he asking me these weird questions or personal questions, this strange guy that I don't even know. Well, I hope you're open-minded, because there are some personal questions towards the end that are important to reveal the whole of your frequency.
Okay.
So there's 4 categories of questions. If there's something strange in your chart in terms of an anomaly or several frequencies that are totally missing, I might need to dig a little deeper and add a 5th category of questions. But the first category is what I call baseline questions. That's to establish your general pattern. You certainly want to go beyond the general into the specific, but initially, the first questions, they're just simple questions like, where do you live, what do you do, what do you like, stuff like that. And I asked you earlier with regard to the King of Hearts if you had your own business, and you said you do, and that's one of the things that female kings do. But anyway, they're usually good business people if they're female kings, so that speaks well if that's in fact your actual birth date. But either way, you could be a good business person. This is not a sound machine. This is, I don't know if I mentioned to you, it's an orchestral tuner. They use this to tune orchestral instruments like bassoons, cellos, violins. But instead of, I have a vocal mic plugged into it, which is not what it was designed for. They have a special mic they put on the hollow body of a bass or cello, and they tune the instrument that way. But I plug a vocal mic into it because then it turns into a perfect device to read the frequencies in the voice of the brain.
So since we're in the middle of the coronavirus and we're staying a healthy distance apart from each other, as you can tell, we're just being extra cautious with a little bit of hand sanitizer and making sure that everything is wiped down so that I don't bring back anything that we don't want, which is not likely because all the vibrations here are very positive and not really conducive for for viruses, I don't think. But
Yeah, I'm so blessed. I'm telling you that since I've done this work, or not since the beginning, but since I had a near-death experience, and I was in a coma for 30 days, and nobody, my friends, my daughter, nobody thought I was going to survive, but I did, thanks to sound therapy and God's grace.
yes.
I healed myself of liver disease, kidney disease, lung disease, all sorts of things, kidney stones, chronic for 7 years. I'm a literal walking testament of sound therapy, and I'm very grateful for it. So I thank God every day and throughout the day, from when I get up in the morning till I go to bed at night, for the blessings that I have. And it's kind of interesting because you actually kind of do fall into that 10 to 15% category where your birth note polarities, usually one of them looks blocked, they're heavy like this, and then one of them is very, is weaker like these. But your birth note polarities, your polarity is like probably your best tone here. This is the way they should all look. And this is actually your birth date frequency, and it's a little weak, but it's kind of interesting. It looks like you have a split octave, which I kind of anticipated. I didn't mention it because when I circled 3, I know your speaking octave is 3, but I could tell because your voice is on the high side but I didn't circle 4. I was tempted to, but I wanted to wait and see if I was right, and I was, that you have a split octave, which goes up.
Yeah, I appreciate this. This has been super helpful. And thank you for taking extra time with me.
You're welcome.
Okay, guys, I'm going to sign off. I know it's been almost 2 hours.